In 1870, a wealthy farmer sold everything he owned to go chase a fortune somewhere else. He died broke alone in a foreign country. Meanwhile, the man who bought his farm found the richest diamond mine in human history, right where the first man used to walk every single day. And here's the part that should actually bother you: most of us are doing exactly what he did, right now, today, without even realizing it. Not with a farm and not with diamonds, but with careers we abandon just before they start paying off. With cities we leave convinced the next one will finally feel right. With relationships we quietly give up on, certain that somewhere out there is a version of happiness we haven't earned yet because the one in front of us stopped feeling exciting enough. This is the true story behind one of the most quietly powerful ideas ever put into words, a lecture delivered over 6,000 times that turned its own speaker into a millionaire simply by telling it. By the end of this video, you're going to see your own life completely differently. Let's get into it. Chapter 1: The Farmer Who Had Everything. There's an old story, the kind passed down as a parable, told by a guide to a traveler crossing the Middle East on camelback in the 1870s, and later spread by a man named Russell Conwell in a lecture he gave more than 6,000 times. It's about a farmer named Ali Hafed. Ali Hafed had land, orchards, grain fields, a garden, a family. By every measure that mattered in his time and place, he was a wealthy man. And here's the detail worth sitting with before anything else happens in this story: he was content, not because he had more than everyone else, but because he had stopped comparing what he had to what he didn't. That's rare. Think about how rare that actually is. Most people, even the ones who technically have enough, are quietly unsettled, checking what everyone else has, wondering if they're falling behind. Ali Hafed wasn't doing that. He was simply satisfied, working his land, living his life. Then one day, a visitor came through. A priest passing through on a journey stopped to rest at Ali Hafed's home, and like any good guest, he made conversation. He started talking about diamonds, how they were formed, what they were worth, what a single one the size of a thumb could buy. A whole county, the priest said, and a mine of them you could put your children on thrones. Picture that dinner conversation for a moment, because the details matter more than they seem to at first. This wasn't a business pitch. Nobody was trying to sell Ali Hafed anything. It was just idle talk, the kind that happens over a shared meal between a host and a passing traveler. The priest wasn't even talking about Ali Hafed's own land. He was simply describing diamonds in the abstract, the way someone today might describe a celebrity's mansion or a stranger's stock portfolio gains. No demand attached, no suggestion that Ali Hafed himself was lacking anything, just a description of something impressive said out loud in the room where Ali Hafed happened to be sitting. Nothing about Ali Hafed's life changed that day, not 1 acre of his land, not 1 coin in his pocket. But something changed anyway, something you can't see, something that doesn't show up on any ledger. A single new thought entered his mind and refused to leave: I don't have enough. Here's the part that should land uncomfortably close to home. Ali Hafed went to bed that night having lost nothing. 0. And yet he went to bed poor, not poor in fact, poor in feeling. He was discontented, and he was discontented simply because he now believed he was poor. The belief came first. It always does. Think about the last time you scrolled through someone else's life online, their new job, their new house, their new relationship, and felt that same small, cold drop in your stomach. Nothing in your actual life changed in that moment. Not your bank account, not your job, not your relationships. But something shifted anyway. That shift is exactly what happened to Ali Hafed, just without a screen involved. This is worth nomming clearly, because it's the whole engine behind everything that happens next in this story. Discontent is rarely caused by what you're missing. It's caused by a new idea of what you're missing, an idea that didn't exist in your mind 5 minutes earlier, and that changes absolutely nothing except how you feel about what you already have. And once that idea takes root, it doesn't stay quiet for long. It starts working on you slowly, the way water works on stone, not through force, but through repetition, 1 quiet replay of the same thought at a time, until what once felt like enough starts to feel like a consolation prize instead. Ali Hafed didn't wake up the next morning suddenly convinced he needed to sell his farm. That certainty took 1 more night, 1 more replay of the priest's words, 1 more comparison between the life he had and the life he'd only just started imagining. Chapter 2: The Seed of Discontent. By morning, Ali Hafed couldn't wait any longer. He woke the priest up early, and if you've ever woken up a tired guest before sunrise, you already know that's not usually a great start to a conversation. But Ali Hafed didn't care. He had 1 question, and it had kept him up all night: where can I find diamonds? The priest gave him an answer that, if you actually stop and examine it, was almost useless. Find a river that runs through white sand between high mountains, he said, and you'll find diamonds there. That's it. No location, no map, no certainty that such a river even existed nearby. Just a vague direction direction and a promise that sounded exactly specific enough to feel real and exactly vague enough to send someone chasing it forever. Ali Hafed didn't question how thin that information actually was. He didn't ask, how do you know, or have you seen this yourself, or why haven't you already gone? He just heard there are plenty of them and that was enough. He sold his farm, collected the money, left his family in the care of a neighbor, and walked away from everything he'd spent his life building to go chase a rumor. Here's a question worth sitting with for a second, because it's the exact same question hiding underneath half the big decisions people make today. How many times have we done this? Quit something stable, sold something valuable, walked away from a relationship or a job or a city, not because we had solid proof of something better, but because someone else's vague description of out there sounded shinier than the right here we'd stopped noticing. There's a particular kind of moment worth nomming here, the moment right before comparison sets in when contentment is still fully intact. Ali Hafed had that moment his entire life, every single morning, walking his own land without a single thought that anything was missing. That moment is more fragile than people realize. It doesn't require anything dramatic to break it. It just requires one new piece of information, delivered by someone confident enough to sound like they know something you don't. Think about how this plays out today in a much faster, much noisier version. It's not one priest passing through once in a lifetime anymore. It's dozens of glimpses a day, a friend's vacation, a stranger's promotion, a classmate's new car, each one landing exactly like that priest's description of diamonds, small and passing, but leaving behind a residue that quietly accumulates. Ali Hafed only needed one conversation to plant the seed. Most people today get that same seed planted dozens of times before breakfast. The pattern almost never announces itself as reckless in the moment. It feels like ambition. It feels like finally chasing what you deserve. Ali Hafed didn't think he was making a mistake as he packed his things. He thought he was finally waking up. There's a particular kind of confidence that shows up right before a bad decision, and it's worth learning to recognize it, because it rarely feels like recklessness from the inside. It feels like clarity. It feels like finally seeing something everyone else has been too comfortable or too scared to admit. Ali Hafed almost certainly felt that exact feeling as he sold his farm, not fear, not doubt, but a strange, energizing certainty that he was finally doing something bold instead of staying small. That feeling is seductive precisely because it doesn't feel like the warning sign it actually is. He searched, first through the region we now call the Mountains of the Moon, then further through Palestine, through Europe, country after country, river after river, sifting sand that never once revealed what he was looking for. Weeks became months. Months became years. His money ran out slowly, the way money always does when there's no plan behind the spending, a little gone here, a little gone there, until one day there simply wasn't any left. Notice something important about the shape of this decline. It wasn't sudden. Nobody loses everything in a single afternoon. It happens exactly the way Ali Hafed's fortune disappeared, gradually enough that each individual day feels survivable, right up until the day none of them are. This is worth remembering because it means the warning signs were never hidden. They were just spread out thin enough over a long enough time that no single moment felt urgent enough to stop and turn back. There's a particular kind of stubbornness that shows up partway through a long search like this, and it's worth nomming because almost everyone recognizes it once it's pointed out. It's the voice that says, I've already come this far, I can't turn back now. Ali Hafed had probably heard that voice somewhere around country number 3 or 4, long after the search had stopped making sense, but long before he was willing to admit it. That voice isn't wisdom. It's a sunk cost dressed up as commitment, the same trap that keeps people in careers, relationships, and cities long after the original reason for staying has quietly disappeared, simply because leaving would mean admitting the search itself was the mistake. But here's what nobody tells you about this kind of searching, and it's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. The money wasn't the real cost. The real cost was time, years of a life, spent chasing a description instead of examining what was already underneath his own feet. And the tragic irony sitting quietly underneath the entire story is this: nobody, not even the priest who started it all, ever went back to check if diamonds might already be exactly where Ali Hafed started. By the time his money and his health had both worn down to nothing, Ali Hafed stood on the shore of a bay in Spain, ragged, broke, and utterly defeated by a search that had consumed everything he once had. And that's where this chapter of the story has to pause, because what happens next is the part almost nobody expects. If you're finding this story uncomfortably familiar already, stay with it, because the next part is where the real twist hits, and it's not the twist you think. Chapter 3, The Search. That's CONSUMEDHIM. There's a version of this story where Ali Hafed simply gives up and goes home in defeat, humbled but alive, having learned an expensive but survivable lesson. That's not what happened. Standing on that shore in Spain, penniless, having given everything he had to a search that never once paid off, Ali Hafed walked into the water and never came back out. Let's sit with that for a moment, because it's easy to let a detail like this pass by too quickly in a motivational story. This isn't really a story about missed opportunity. Not first, anyway. Underneath it, it's a story about a man who let a single idea, what I have isn't enough, consume literally everything. His money, his family, his health, and eventually his life. The diamonds diamonds were almost beside the point by the end. The real damage had already been done long before he ran out of places to look. Here's the uncomfortable question worth asking yourself right now, and I want you to actually answer it rather than skim past it. What have you already sacrificed chasing something you were never even sure existed? Maybe not your literal life, but how much of your actual life? Years in a career path you weren't sure about, relationships you left chasing a version of happiness someone else described to you, moves and restarts and reinventions, all fueled by the same quiet, corrosive belief Ali Hafed carried the whole time, that satisfaction was somewhere else and never here. Think about how differently two people can respond to the exact same feeling of restlessness. One person feels it and immediately starts researching a completely different career, a different city, a fresh start somewhere far away. Another person feels that same restlessness and asks a harder, slower question first. Is this feeling telling me something true about my circumstances, or is it just the itch itself, showing up again in a new costume? Only one of those two people ever actually gets to the bottom of what's really going on. The other just keeps moving, mistaking motion for progress, the same way Ali Hafed mistook another country for another chance. This is where the story stops being about a 19th century farmer and starts being about literally anyone who has ever felt that particular itch. The one that whispers that your current job, city, relationship, or level of success is somehow the wrong one, and the right one is out there, always just one more search away. Think about how this shows up in an ordinary modern life. Someone spends 2 years in a job, gets a little restless, and quietly starts believing the next company, the next title, the next city will finally feel different. They leave. 6 months later, the same restlessness resurfaces, right on schedule, not because the new job was wrong, but because the restlessness itself was never actually about the job. It was a habit of mind, one that will follow a person from job to job, city to city, relationship to relationship, until it's recognized for what it actually is rather than blamed on whatever's nearest. There's a name worth giving to this pattern, because numbing it makes it much easier to catch the next time it shows up. It's the difference between a problem and a habit. Problem is specific, this particular job has this particular issue, and fixing or leaving it actually resolves the discomfort. Habit is portable. It comes with you unpacked and reassembled in the very next situation, wearing a slightly different disguise each time. Ali Hafed's restlessness was never a problem with his farm. It was a habit of comparison that would have followed him to any farm, any country, any fortune he might have eventually found, because the habit itself was never actually about diamonds. Here's the pattern interrupt worth sitting with. The itch is never satisfied by finding the thing. It's satisfied by stopping the search, and those are not the same skill. Some people search their whole lives and never once consider that the skill they actually need to build is the ability to stop, look down, and truly examine what's already in front of them. If you're still with me at this point, here's why the next part matters more than everything you've heard so far. This is the moment the story flips completely upside down. Because while Ali Hafed was dying in Spain, still searching for something he was convinced didn't exist anywhere near him, something extraordinary was happening back on the very farm he'd sold for almost nothing. If you're still here, this next part is the one that actually changes everything. Because what the new owner of that farm found wasn't just diamonds, it was proof of exactly how close Ali Hafed had been to everything he wanted the entire time. Chapter 4: What was found after he left. The man who bought Ali Hafed's farm wasn't searching for anything. He wasn't chasing a rumor or a description or a vague promise from a stranger passing through. He was simply living his life, tending the same land Ali Hafed once tended, until one ordinary day, he led his camel out to the garden to drink from the small stream running through the property. As the camel dipped its nose into the shallow water, something caught the farmer's eye. A stone, unusual, dark with a strange flash of light buried inside it. He didn't know what it was. He just thought it looked interesting enough to bring inside, so he set it on the mantle over his fireplace, not as treasure, just as decoration. Here's where the story does something almost too perfectly ironic to be real, except that it is. Not long after, the very same priest who had first told Ali Hafed about diamonds happened to visit this farm too. He saw the stone sitting casually on the mantle and immediately recognized exactly what it was: a diamond, sitting in the same house it had probably always been near. They rushed outside together, stirred up the sand in that same garden stream with their bare hands, and found another, then more, scattered through the property like the ground itself had been quietly holding a secret the entire time Ali Hafed lived there, walked over it, plowed through it, and never once thought to look down. That farm turned out to be sitting on top of the diamond mines of Golconda, one of the richest, most legendary diamond deposits in human history, the kind of mine that would go on to produce stones fit for royal crowns. Ali Hafed hadn't just missed an opportunity. He had been standing on top of one of the greatest fortunes in recorded history every single day for years while quietly believing he was poor. Consider how many ordinary mornings Ali Hafed must have walked past that exact stream on his way to check on his crops or greet a neighbor close enough to touch water that was quietly sitting on top of one of the richest deposits on earth. Nothing about that walk ever felt significant. It was just his garden, his stream, his ordinary land, right up until the day someone else, with no expectations and no search underway, happened to notice a stone that had probably been visible for years. Sit with the timeline for a second, because this is the detail that makes the whole story unbearable in the best possible way. He didn't need to travel anywhere. He didn't need the priest's vague directions or the mountains of the moon or Palestine or Europe. He needed to dig in his own garden, the exact garden he walked past every single morning of his life, right up until the day he sold it for almost nothing and left to go find elsewhere the very thing he had already owned. Here's the part that should genuinely sting, and it's meant to. Ali Hafed didn't lose the diamonds because they weren't his. He lost them because he stopped believing his own ground was worth examining closely. He assumed that if something valuable were really there, he would have already noticed it. And that single, quiet assumption is exactly what convinces most people in almost every generation since to walk straight past their own version of Golconda without ever once picking up a shovel. There's also something worth noticing about the priest in this second half of the story. The same man who unknowingly started Ali Hafed's downfall is the one who ends up discovering the mine purely by accident on a completely unrelated visit. He wasn't looking for diamonds this time either. He recognized the stone because he already knew what to look for from all his talk of diamonds years before, but he only found it because he happened to be present, paying attention on an ordinary day with no expectations attached. That's worth sitting with. The discovery didn't come from a more determined search. It came from ordinary attention applied to an ordinary moment by someone who wasn't desperately looking for anything at all. Because here's the uncomfortable question this raises for you, specifically right now. What if the career you're bored of, the city you're desperate to leave, the skill you already have but have stopped taking seriously? What if one of those is your actual acre of diamonds and you've simply never dug deep enough to find out? That question is exactly where this story stops being about Ali Hafed and starts being about you. Chapter 5, Your Own Acres of Diamonds. Here's something worth being honest about before we go further. This isn't a story that only happened once, to one unlucky farmer in the 1800s. Versions of it happen constantly in ordinary modern lives, and they rarely look as dramatic as walking into the ocean. They usually look like something much quieter, a slow, almost invisible drift away from something valuable, towards something that only looks better because it's unfamiliar. Think about how often this shows up today. Someone spends 3 years building real skill and relationships in one career, gets a little bored, and jumps to something completely unrelated, chasing a version of success someone else described online, only to discover the new path requires starting over from zero, in a field they understand far less than the one they just left. Someone moves cities convinced their whole life will finally click into place somewhere else, only to realize a year later that the same unresolved habits and patterns simply followed them there. Here's what makes this pattern worth taking seriously rather than dismissing as one unlucky farmer's bad decision. Conwell didn't just tell this one story in his original lecture. He told others alongside it because he'd noticed the exact same pattern repeating in real, ordinary lives around him. One of the examples he used was far more recent and far less exotic than Ali Hafed's, a Pennsylvania farmer who sold his land for less than $1,000 and moved to Canada to work for a relative, convinced his own farm had nothing left to offer him. Not long after he left, the new owner of that Pennsylvania farm discovered oil underneath it, oil that would go on to be worth millions of dollars, sitting in the exact ground the original farmer had walked away from for almost nothing. Notice what's genuinely unsettling about that second story. It's not ancient. It's not wrapped in the distance of a parable from long ago in a faraway desert. It happened in Conwell's own era in an ordinary American state to an ordinary working farmer who made the same decision Ali Hafed made for the exact same reason, a quiet belief that the ground he already owned had nothing left worth discovering. This is exactly the grass is greener trap, and here's what makes it so effective. It never asks you to prove that the new grass is actually greener. It just asks you to imagine it might be, the same way the priest never actually proved diamonds existed near that mysterious river. He just described it well enough that Ali Hafed filled in the rest himself. This trap works especially well because it only ever shows you the highlight reel of the alternative. You don't see the new job's frustrating meetings or its own version of boredom. You don't see the new city's traffic, its own loneliness, its own version of the same problems you were trying to escape. You only see the polished version, the promotion announcement, not the 18-month grind that preceded it, the vacation photo, not the ordinary Tuesday that makes up most of anyone's life anywhere. Ali Hafed never once saw what an ordinary day actually looked like for a successful diamond prospector. He only heard the size of the reward, which is exactly why it felt so irresistible. Here's a distinction worth making clear clearly, because it changes how you apply this idea. This isn't an argument against ever changing anything in your life. Sometimes the current ground genuinely doesn't have diamonds in it, and leaving is exactly right. The lesson isn't never leave. The lesson is actually check first, dig where you already are, seriously and honestly, before assuming the answer lies somewhere you haven't been yet. So here's a practical way to actually apply this, instead of just nodding along and forgetting it by tomorrow. Take whatever you're currently unsatisfied with, your job, your skill set, your city, your relationship, and ask yourself a genuinely different question than the one you've been asking. Not should I leave this for something better, but have I actually dug here as deeply as I could before deciding this ground is empty? Here's what digging deeper actually looks like in practice, rather than as an abstract idea. In a career, it might mean going far beyond the basic requirements of your role until you're genuinely one of the best people doing that specific job, not switching fields the moment things get repetitive. In a city, it might mean actually exploring the parts of it you've never bothered to visit, instead of assuming you've already seen everything worth seeing. In a relationship, it might mean having the harder conversation you've been avoiding, instead of quietly deciding the relationship itself is the problem. Most people, if they're honest, will realize they've barely scratched the surface of what they already have. They've mastered the basics of their job but never gone deep enough to become genuinely exceptional at it. They've lived in their city without ever fully exploring what it actually offers. They've had a relationship without ever doing the deeper work required to make it thrive. The ground was never the problem, the depth of digging was. Here's the real question worth sitting with as we move forward. If Ali Hafed had simply picked up a shovel in his own garden instead of walking away from it, his entire story changes. So what's the equivalent shovel sitting in your hands right now that you've been ignoring because you assumed the real treasure had to be somewhere else? It might be a skill you already have but have stopped practicing seriously because it stopped feeling new. It might be a relationship you've quietly stopped investing in because the early excitement wore off and you mistook that for the relationship itself running out of value. It might be the very city or job you're scrolling away from right now mid-video, already halfway convinced the next one will finally be different. In every case, the shovel is the same. Closer attention, sustained over time, applied to something you already have instead of something you merely imagine. Because the truth is, most of us aren't failing to find diamonds, we're failing to dig where we're already standing. Chapter 6, Why We Keep Making Ali Hafed's Mistake. Here's a question worth asking honestly. If this lesson is so simple, why does almost everyone still make the exact same mistake Ali Hafed made? The answer isn't that people are foolish. It's that the mistake is designed almost perfectly to feel like wisdom while you're making it. Think about it from the inside. Nobody wakes up and thinks, today I will abandon something valuable to chase a vague rumor. They think, I finally see clearly what I've been missing. The discontent doesn't feel like a trap. It feels like clarity. That's exactly what makes it so dangerous. It barks the emotional signature of genuine insight, while actually being nothing more than a new comparison your mind wasn't making 5 minutes earlier. This is worth nomming precisely because it's the actual mechanism behind almost every grass is greener decision people regret later. Discontent almost always arrives disguised as ambition. It rarely says you are being irrational. It says you deserve more than this, which is a much harder voice to argue with because on the surface it sounds true. It sounds motivating. It sounds like the version of you that refuses to settle. Here's a useful way to tell the difference in the moment, rather than only in hindsight. Genuine ambition tends to focus your attention. It makes you want to get better at something specific, to go deeper into a skill, a relationship, a craft. Comparison-driven discontent tends to scatter your attention instead. It makes everything you currently have feel slightly duller, without pointing you toward anything specific to actually build. Ali Hafed's discontent didn't make him want to become a better farmer or improve his own land. It made him want to leave it entirely for something vague and undefined, described secondhand by someone who wasn't even offering to go with him. But here's the distinction that actually matters, and it's the one Ali Hafed never made. There's a difference between refusing to settle and refusing to look closely at what you already have. Ambition, done honestly, digs deeper into the ground you're standing on before it ever considers moving to new ground. What consumed Ali Hafed wasn't ambition. It was comparison dressed up as ambition, and those two things can look identical from the inside, right up until one of them costs you everything. There's a simple way to tell the two apart if you're willing to be honest with yourself in the moment. Real ambition usually comes with a plan and a willingness to put in unglamorous work over time. The comparison-driven version usually comes with urgency, a feeling that you need to act right now before it's too late, before someone else gets there first. Ali Hafed didn't take time to research whether that river actually existed. He didn't ask for a map. He acted on urgency, not on evidence, and that urgency is almost always comparison wearing ambition's clothing. Here's why this keeps repeating itself generation after generation, and it's the part that should genuinely concern you. The story of Ali Hafed has been told for over a century, in speeches given thousands of times, in sermons, in books, in videos exactly like this one, and the mistake still hasn't stopped happening. Knowing the lesson lesson intellectually has never been the hard part. The hard part is catching yourself in the exact moment the seed of discontent lands, before it has time to grow into a decision you can't undo. There's a reason knowing the lesson isn't enough on its own, and it's worth being honest about it here. Reading or hearing a story like this one produces a brief, clear moment of insight, the kind that feels powerful in the moment, the kind that makes you nod and think, yes, I understand this now. But insight fades within days, sometimes hours, back into the same old default patterns of comparison and restlessness, unless it's paired with something more durable than a single moment of clarity. That's exactly why the practical test below matters more than the story itself. So here's a practical test worth carrying with you after this video ends. The next time you feel that particular itch, the conviction that something better exists somewhere else, that this job, this city, this relationship, this version of your life simply isn't enough, pause before you act on it and ask one honest question. Have I actually dug here, or am I just assuming the ground is empty because I've stopped looking closely? That single pause held consistently over a lifetime is the entire difference between the person who finds their acres of diamonds and the person who sells the farm. Chapter 7, The Man Who Told This Story 6,000 Times. Here's something that makes this entire lesson even stranger, and it's worth knowing before this video ends. The man who turned Ali Hafed's story into a famous lecture, Russell Conwell, wasn't just a storyteller. He was living proof of the exact lesson he kept repeating. Conwell had already tried several different paths before this one. He'd practiced law for years, and later became a pastor of a small, struggling church. By most measures, neither career had made him wealthy or especially notable. It would have been easy at that point in his life to assume his own particular diamonds simply weren't anywhere nearby, to keep searching for some entirely new path, the way Ali Hafed searched for some entirely new river. It's worth imagining what it must have felt like to be Conwell at that point, a man in his middle years, having already tried the respectable path of law and the meaningful path of ministry, without either one producing the kind of impact he must have hoped for. That's exactly the moment where most people start looking sideways, wondering if some entirely different career, some fresh start in a new field, might finally be the answer. Conwell had every reason to feel that same itch Ali Hafed felt. Instead, he looked at what he already had, a story he'd been telling informally for years, one that people seemed to genuinely respond to, and decided to go deeper into that, rather than wider into something new. Instead, he did something much quieter. He took one story, this exact story, the one you've just heard, and he told it. Then he told it again, and again, over 6,000 times in city after city, to audience after audience, refining it slightly each time but never abandoning it for something newer or flashier. He didn't go looking for a completely different fortune elsewhere. He dug deeper into the one idea he already had. That decision built something remarkable. The money earned from telling this single lecture over and over eventually funded the founding of a university, one that still operates today, educating tens of thousands of students a year, built almost entirely on the proceeds of one man refusing to abandon one good idea in search of a shinier one. Think about the scale of that patience for a moment. 6,000 repetitions of the same lecture isn't a clever shortcut. It's an almost unreasonable amount of repetition, the kind most people would have abandoned after the first few hundred times out of sheer boredom with their own material. Conwell didn't get bored, or if he did, he didn't let boredom convince him the idea itself had run dry. He treated the story the way a good farmer treats good land, as something that keeps producing year after year, as long as you keep tending it rather than abandoning it for a field that only looks more promising because you haven't worked it yet. Here's the detail worth sitting with as this video comes to a close. Conwell wasn't preaching a lesson he'd only read about. He was living it in real time, every single time he stepped back on stage to tell the same story again. While plenty of people around him were likely chasing the next new opportunity, the next new venture, the next reinvention, Conwell just kept digging into the same acre of ground, the same story, refined and deepened with each telling, until it produced more than most people's entire search for something completely new ever could. That's worth remembering the next time you feel the pull to abandon something you've already built, in favor of starting over somewhere shinier. Sometimes the right move really is to leave, but sometimes the diamonds were always in the depth, not the direction, in going deeper into what you already have, rather than wider into everything you don't. There's a version of this story where Ali Hafed simply stays home, picks up a shovel, and turns his own ordinary farm into one of the richest pieces of land in human history, without ever setting foot outside his own garden. That version was always available to him. It just required one thing he never gave it, a closer look at what he already had, before deciding it wasn't enough. That's the real weight of this story, and it's worth carrying with you long after this video ends. The diamonds were never missing. They were simply unexamined, buried under an assumption so quiet, so ordinary, that it never once felt like a mistake while it was happening. Think back over what we've walked through together. The contented farmer who lost every everything to a single new comparison. The search that consumed years chasing a rumor with no real evidence behind it. The discovery that proved the fortune had been underfoot the entire time. And finally, the man who took the opposite path, digging deeper into one story instead of chasing 100 new ones, and built a university out of it. All of it circles back to the same single idea. The ground you're already standing on deserves a closer look before you decide it has nothing left to give. If this story made you think differently about something you've been chasing, or something you've been quietly ready to walk away from, that's exactly the kind of reflection worth sitting with, not scrolling past. If it helped, consider subscribing. This channel exists to keep finding stories like this one, the quiet, century-old lessons that somehow still explain exactly what's happening in modern life. Because here's something worth wondering about as this video ends. Ali Hafed isn't the only person in history who sold something valuable too early. There's another story, just as old, just as quietly devastating, about a man who traded something priceless for almost nothing, simply because he was hungry in the moment and couldn't see past it. What does it actually cost in the long run to trade something permanent for something that only feels urgent right now? That's exactly where we're headed next time.